About 12 years ago, I began communicating with dead animals and people even before I totally believed that that was possible. I'm going to tell you all about that story, how this came to be for me, and I'm also going to talk a bit about how connecting with spiritual entities, whether those are former people or if they're angels or any other kind of entity that is not physically expressed, this kind of mediumship is not only for people who want to become professional mediums or psychics. It's not only for certain people that are born that way. And also, you don't have to have spontaneously started having such an experience at any point in your life in order to cultivate this. In fact, even though I started communicating with deceased or passed on entities, I had never done it before to my awareness. So I'm going to dig into all of that and share with you if you want to open up your own extraordinary abilities to live an extraordinary life, then I think you can, but you have to choose it. Hello, and welcome to the Charmed Life podcast. This podcast is all about magic, metaphysics, mysticism, and the unconditional love of the universe. And I am your host. My name is Tricia Carr. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Tricia Carr. I'm a multidimensional channel, animal telepath, and a teacher of astral mastery and really just all things psychic and intuitive. I'm also a 5-1 reflector in human design and a Pisces sun. And I really feel that I'm probably on my last incarnation, which is leading to me having this mission that I really feel. I feel as though it is a mission. And I feel it very strongly, even though I'm saying it kind of casually. I'm kind of easing you in on it. But I have a mission to help people to awaken their extraordinary abilities so that they can live their lives as fully realized citizens of the entire universe. So let's dive into this story that I'm telling you about. About 12 years ago, I did begin communicating evidentially. And when I say evidentially, that means it's not just I think I'm communicating with them. I mean, I am having communication with individuals who used to be expressed here physically. So it first started with animals, and then it became people. But as I communicated with animals who had passed on, I also was communicating that they were actually other people's family members, not just my own, like past animals, my cat who had passed on or something like that. It was other people's. It started with my friends, communicating with my friends' past animals, and them telling me things about their lives, like guidance to give my friends that was not something that I knew about. And one in particular, I will tell you, and it was my friend, and her dog came through to me, as we say, as mediums. Her dog, who has passed, came to me and told me that he was concerned about, I don't remember which ankle it was. I'm going to say her left ankle. This is over 12 years ago. Her left ankle, and that she needed to, maybe wear a bandage on it, but also he didn't want that to keep her from her running. And I didn't know anything about, she was running. I didn't know anything about her ankle. And she was like, yes, this ankle. And she said, and you know what? I recently was talking to my husband about the fact that I was afraid to go running in the evening, and that she's like, well, but I'll take, her current dog, I'll take him with me, and maybe that'll protect me. But she had delayed running for a couple of months, and it was actually difficult for her, not just physically, because it was her exercise, but it was also like her meditation time. It was a time that she was able to detox from the energies of the day, and she really went into a moving meditation. And so this is why her dog on the other side was like, wrap the ankle, take your dog, the dog he's like, I'm guiding him, the dog who is living now. I'm his guide. He's capable, and just make sure you go earlier before the sun goes down so that you stay safe, also so you don't trip over things and hurt that ankle, but also so that you are safe, so you don't have to feel like you're not safe because of the people that are out at that time. So that was something that really blew my mind. Now, when I say I had been communicating with deceased animals, and I didn't even know that was a thing. But let me digress a little bit and tell a bit of my story that is the backstory to that. So this was around the time that I was about 40 years old. And previous to that, I'd never gotten a psychic reading. I'd never entertained getting a reading with a medium, or I didn't really know anyone who was a medium. But I was in a different part of my life where I was like really happy. A lot of great things had started to happen for me. I actually, like, my deeper backstory, which I won't go fully into. As a child, I had an abusive childhood. I had a lot of trauma as a childhood, in my childhood, and then my early adulthood also, very traumatic things, as the pattern often continues. So at this point in my life, I was about 40 and I was married, and I had this wonderful relationship, I still do, with my amazing husband. And I also at that time had kind of come into a career that I quite loved. By now I've actually segued out of it, just, spoiler alert, eventually down the line. I loved it then. And it was such a becoming for me, because not only did I have a relationship that was amazing, the center of my life as, a family, when I'd had a family that was very toxic. And the central figures of the toxicity were the male figures in that family before my family of origin. So here I was with a wonderful partner, and I had moved into a career where I felt really empowered. I was making more money than I genuinely ever imagined making. I also grew up in a lot of the time that I was a child, it was poverty. And then in my early adulthood, it was basically poverty, because I was broken as an individual. It was really difficult for me to, figure out a way to do this gig of life. Shorthanding that, maybe we'll hear more of that later. So here I was, pretty happy and satisfied in a lot of ways, and doing really well in this career. And then I was noticing that I was waking up in the morning and I'd be like, ugh, what am I feeling? And I would feel something. It might be kind of a fear, or like some kind of like discordant kind of feeling. And I would go, what is that? And I'd kind of let it develop into a thought. And the thought would be something that didn't make any sense for my life. Something to the effect of being afraid of going to work, or that I disliked work, or maybe even something about relationships. And none of it made sense for my life. And I thought, well, that's really weird. And I could make it go away. I could go like, that's not true. That's so strange. Why am I having these feelings and thoughts that actually they don't even make sense for me? Because I've got my own true bad thoughts and bad feelings that that I do create, or that are in response to things that are really in my life. So I shouldn't be, by all, accounts, it wouldn't be healthy for me, at least, to have these thoughts and feelings that just they aren't useful to me. I don't know why. I can't tell you a thought before the thought that happened where I said, maybe I'll get a psychic reading. Never considered it before. And honestly had never thought like, oh, that's bad or that's fake. I never thought about it, one way or the other. But I suddenly found myself going, maybe I should get a psychic reading. And I remember very clearly saying, what's the harm in it? My mind is really strong. So even if this person says something to me that's unpleasant, I don't have to accept that. And maybe this person will say something to me that's like a fun story that is, like interesting or fun, and so I thought, why not? And so I booked a 15-minute reading with the psychic. Now, the psychic was actually local to me. I'll tell you who she is because she's a part of my origin story. Her name is Laura Powers. And it was a 15-minute reading, and it was on the phone. And so I had this reading with Laura, and Laura, one of the first things she said is, well, you're an empath, right? Like, as if I knew it. And I was like, what's that? That's like from Star Trek, right? And also from Charmed. So, remember Phoebe was an empath. and by the way, I'd forgotten that at that point, but I very much related to Phoebe when I watched those episodes of Charmed, the original one. I was like, yeah, I'm just like Phoebe. Completely forgotten this word empath. It had no usage in my lexicon. I, in that moment, remembered Counselor Troy from Star Trek, Next Gen. At any rate, Laura said, well, yeah, an empath is someone who experiences other people's emotions and thoughts as though they are their own. Before she got the full explanation out, I genuinely just started like, I think I started crying. That's how I remember. I just kind of like started to release. And again, I was witnessing it at the same time as my logical mind was still absorbing the words she had just said. My spirit started to release. My emotions started to go, yes, finally. It was like a catharsis, and it was a release, and it was a relief. It was like named it. Yes, that's it. And that's what's always been happening to me. So from that point, 15-minute reading. I don't remember the rest of the reading. But from that point on, that was December 27th, 2014. I remember the date. That was like the moment. So I was actually quite hooked because it was so like cathartic. Like I said, it was so revelatory. It was like it's making so many things make sense just with that phrase. So I started investigating it on the internet, and much to my chagrin, was finding a lot of people when I read their opinion about what an empath is, I felt less empowered. If I were to agree with them, I would have to agree that I was broken and oh so special that no one else could ever relate to me and that I probably just needed to stay indoors all the time. And I was just like, no, I don't think I am made. Like, if this is how I'm really like true predisposition is what it feels like, I'm truly predisposed to this. And I don't think nature makes mistakes. So that I'm just always broken, especially in the sense that to accept that meant that it would bump up against everything else that I also felt was true to me, which is I want to be with people and I want to express myself and I want to all these things, all these other things that would make the labels or the, that was people were saying about empaths, it just didn't, they didn't, it was cognitive dissonance. So I kept looking and just kept rejecting things that were just like, as we say, do not resonate with me. Do not feel a resonance, a positive yes, as I felt with Laura saying, an empath is someone who experiences other people's emotions and thoughts as though they are their own. So I did find someone, I happened upon someone who is named Caroline von Kimenad. And her website is The Happy Sensitive. I believe that's the web domain, but you can find her by looking up her name. It's Caroline, spelled like Caroline, if you were saying it with an American accent. Von Kimenad with a V, Ankimmenade, I believe that's it. So I love to attribute to the people that have helped me in my life. And so Caroline, her like little tagline is go from suffering sponge to sensitive savant. And I was like, yes, that's it. That resonates. That's the one. So I went into this energy coaching, so to speak, with Caroline. And I'd never done anything like that before either. I remember it wasn't like it was expensive for me in my budget. I had just never paid for some kind of personal development, let alone spiritual development for myself. So I remember it feeling strange because it was so new to actually pay for like probably 4 or 5 sessions, as I don't recall, as now it seems so long ago. And what we would do is we would go, is she would induce me into a meditative state, which now, by the way, now I'm a certified clinical hypnotherapist and I know all about going into state and the resourceful capacity of that. And also that's how we access communicating with spirit. And that's what psychics do. That's what intuitives do. And I'm all those things. And so with Caroline, we had these sessions where I would go into a meditative state. She would have me send my energy or kind of tune into a chakra and see what kind of information came forth. Now, information that came forth that would be insightful about my goal, which was to understand how to live like a sensitive savant, you know what I mean? So that this empathic thing, this empathic nature wasn't taking on energies or thoughts and basically holding on to them when they weren't serving me. as and a person who's highly empathic, which, by the way, being an empath isn't like you're better than other people. No, it's about 50% of the population are emotionally, at least, an emotional empath, and 50% are emotionally not an empath. And then there are other ways that you can have empathic mapping. So if you know human design, basically the undefined centers are ways that you bring in information unfiltered. And some of those, the ones that are in the body, are more like an empathic response because it's felt as a state or a feeling in the body. And then when it's the undefined ajna or head, then it's more like it's more thoughts or imagery, and it's more like telepathy. Even though telepathy and being an empath, they overlap. At any rate, I digress. So with Caroline, it was actually my final session with her, and we were tuning into my sacral. And when I started that session with Caroline, the last session, I brought to her the fact that I wanted to start. The thing that was concerning me was this cat named Helen, I had named her Helen. And Helen was a feral cat who lived outdoors, had been coming up to my back door, looking in the window at me, a feral cat looking right in my face. And and she was clearly very pregnant, by the way. And I said to Caroline, it's like she's saying, I need help. So now we're deep in the session, we're in my sacral, and Caroline says, oh, you know what, let's go back into your sacral. I know there's something else we're supposed to be bringing forth for this session. I'm like, I think we're going over and I feel bad. And she's like, yeah, no, don't worry about it. And so I tune into my sacral. By the way, I didn't know what chakras were at the time. It didn't matter. The intention still works. The guide is holding the space. And I tuned into the sacral, and she's like, what do you see? I see a little girl. She's like maybe 4 years old, and she's in an Easter dress, and she's dancing and singing, and she talks to animals. And Caroline interrupts me, and she's like, that's it. That's it. You're an animal communicator, and you need to bring that ability online for yourself. Now, I was stunned. I'd heard of animal communication before because I'd had 2 sessions with an animal communicator. At this point, it was probably 2 or 3 years prior, with my kitty who was in his final days, and an animal communicator. And she brought that. I mean, I was pretty impressed because she brought through things that she couldn't have known about him, and it supported me in his final days. And it probably also gave me an awakening to my animal communication, even though I wasn't totally aware of it. So Caroline said, you're an animal communicator. You need to reawaken this faculty. So when we finished the session, go talk to Helen. And so I did. Helen was sitting there on my back porch, and I just kind of closed my eyes and took a breath and basically sent her. It was like I was sending my energy toward her, is the way it seemed. It was like I was now I would say I was opening a channel between us. And I said to her silently, telepathically, do you need help? Helen said, I can't have these babies. And she said this, it's the way, in case you're not familiar with how telepathy or talking to like angels or your past loved ones or anything, it all happens very similarly. I heard it. It's like, it's the same way if you were to think of, if you remember something, the way someone said something. Or I often like to say, can you remember, without singing it out loud, can you call up Purple Rain? Because I love Prince. And like playing it in your mind, that's how it was like she played it into my mind. I can't have these babies. Now, I was surprised because if it were something I were making up to align with my own biases and my own preferences, I would have made up her saying, I'm going to have these babies and everything's great and fine and you don't have to intervene. I have a little bluebird who's a best friend and I love this and that and it's great out here and it's wonderful and I'm not scared at all and everything's fine. Because it's really scary to make a choice like that, to intervene for someone who's not even like, I wasn't officially her guardian because she was feral. Now, meanwhile, I also had been talking to a cat rescuer who was telling me, you have to trap her and take her to the hospital. It's so dangerous for cats that are feral. And when they have babies, probably they'll all die and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, that was also like, oh, I hope she's wrong about that. At any rate, she said, I can't have these babies, is what Helen told me. And then I said, okay, well, if you can't have those, but you don't want to have those babies, I will trap you, humane trap you guys. Just so you know, it's totally humane. It's like a little trip plate in the back of the trap, and then where the food is, when they step on it to get the food, it closes the gate behind them. They're totally fine. I said, I'm going to trap you. I'm going to take you to the hospital, and you won't have those babies, and you won't have babies anymore. And she said, I can't have these babies. I don't want to go to the hospital. I don't want to have babies anymore. And the thing is, I had already TNR'd, trapped, neutered, and sterilized 2 other cats. One was actually what I call her husband, a male, who they were besties. I mean, they were absolutely spouses. And I had, and if you're not familiar with it, the principle of TNR, of trap, neuter, and sterilizing, is that it's healthier for them. They're not going to be overpopulating. And if they're already mature, if they're already grown and they haven't been socialized to humans, it's very painful to try to socialize them. So if you return them, it will stabilize. There won't be like this influx of other feral cats trying to take the place in the ecosystem. And they're healthier because they're not having to forage and fight and defend. And I was going to continue to feed them. So basically, they effectively become outdoor cats. So Tom, her partner, was already neutered and feeding him. And then there was another female cat who, incidentally, is the mother of one of my cats. And I had her sterilized. And so Helen knew the other cat, the female cat, whose name is Marisol. They see each other. And I said, okay, well, when you come out, you're going to be able to live like Marisol. And she's like, yeah, that's what I want. But I don't want to go to the hospital. I'm like, okay, well, that's not the negotiable part. Anyway, I had tried to trap and take Helen to the hospital before, and she wouldn't trap. Next day, after I'd set up the appointment to be able to take her in, no, actually, it was probably 2 days later, she trapped, like right away. I took her in. And she, had the procedures. The doctor, when he gave her back to me, said, it's really good that you brought her in when you did, because it's pretty clear to me that she wasn't going to be able to have these babies. They weren't going to make it out. And if she had been out there unassisted, she would have died as well. So she couldn't have those babies. And so I was hooked. I was finished with Caroline's work. And I moved on to exploring with another teacher named Hillary Michelson. And I went to an empath class with Hillary eventually. But this was a few weeks later, because in the meantime, I started practicing animal communication with my friends, like talking to their animals and again, having these evidential conversations. So then I had like the situation with the friend who I said, her dog who was passed told me about the ankle, wanted her to wrap it and run because it was so important for her spiritual health. So I go to a class with Hillary, and there's a few people there, and Hillary kind of, says to her, this is the first time I met her, she's like, okay, wait, can you remind me, where are you with your, with everything? And I was like, well, I'm like an animal communicator, I guess. And like, I talk to animals, I guess. And I'm an empath. And Hillary's like, okay, yeah, you're a medium. And I said, what? And she's like, yeah, you're a medium. And I was like, I don't even know if I believe in that. I don't even know if I believe that people can talk to past people. And she was like, wait a minute. You said you're an animal communicator. You've been practicing this, right? I said, yeah. She's like, okay, have you been talking to past animals as well as living animals? And I said, well, yeah. And she's like, okay, so that's mediumship. And you're a human, so you can also talk with humans that are past. It's so funny to me. Like, and I was like, okay. So again, I wasn't totally sure about where I landed with whether it's reincarnation or what happens after we pass on, I had as a kid and a young adult been in religion, the Christian religion, and they don't talk about that at all. They just say you go to heaven, but you certainly don't like talk to your past loved ones. And I didn't know what I thought about reincarnation. It hadn't been something I'd really thought about. At any rate, I started to practice it, just do some practices in the class, and same thing, bringing through information that I couldn't have known, that my practice partners, my fellow students, were like, yes, that's my mom, that's this, that's that. So again, even though I wasn't certain how or what or why I could possibly talk to deceased animals and deceased humans, it nevertheless began to occur for a few reasons. Not because my beliefs were perfectly aligned with it, but because my beliefs had softened enough, just like me saying, my mind is strong, so I can see what kind of, thing might happen by having the psychic reading. My curiosity had expanded enough that when I saw my friend's deceased dog and he told me something, I was willing to say yes to pass along that information and then repeat that process. When the teacher, Hillary Michelson, suggested I was a medium, I was willing to just see what might happen if I practiced it with another fellow student. And that's how these things started to kind of like open up for me. Because here's the thing. Our beliefs are what hold things like this in place or not. And at the same time, it doesn't require perfect belief. It can just be curiosity. And our belief system is very complex. Some people will say, oh, they're born mediums. And that could be their experience, that they've always had mediumship available to them. But here's the thing. Up until the point where I started trying in Hillary's class to see what could happen there, I was under the impression that nothing like this had ever happened to me before. But then as I started to be a little bit more in my spiritual development and observing my life, I reflected on many instances in my life. First of all, as a little kid, I had imaginary friends. And these imaginary friends, one of them revealed herself to me to be my great-grandmother by giving me her name, which I didn't know the name of my great-grandmother. And after I'd been communicating with this guide who was giving me names, saw that aligned with what was in census records as my great-grandmother's name. And when that evidence landed on me, after about 2 months of communicating with this in meditation with this spiritual entity, and then she said, yes, I am your great-grandmother. I've always been with you. And do you remember your imaginary friend when you were little? Little Mama is what I named my imaginary friend. She's like, I'm Little Mama. I've always been with you. And I was like, am talking to this spiritual entity in my meditative state. I'm like, well, what is that? Why? And she's like, well, you know how your grandmother, which my grandmother passed when I think I was about 18 months old. So I didn't really know my grandmother. My grandmother was quite tall. I think she was 5'8" or 9. And my mother is also quite tall. She's 5'8". And she's like, my daughter and my granddaughter, your mom, are tall. But I, in my physical life, was quite short. And so compared to them, I was like, I'm one of your mamas. And that's why we devised that I was your little mama. So eventually I asked my mother, I was like, did you ever know your grandmother? And she's like, yeah. And I said, was she short? And she said, oh, yes, she was very short. So, and that was probably 2 years after I'd had that experience. I held off on even like sleuthing that out in my family. So I digress. So when I started to see, well, I had imaginary friends when I was a little kid, but I didn't think of that as being mediumistic. I remembered many instances when I was praying, even though I was in my religious practice. I was actually in a spiritual practice, even though there was also religion involved. And there would be an entity that arrived, and I'd be like, that must be Jesus. You know what I mean? Because that's what was safe for me. And I had different times where I would learn something about someone. It's like I would hear it in my mind or in my body, And then I would talk to someone about it and they're like, I never said that to you. And I thought, are you sure? Because I thought that I was remembering us talking about that when I heard it, you know? No, no, I didn't. To where it would like really weird people out. Anyway, the point that I started practicing, I didn't totally believe in it. And I also had the observation that it had never happened to me before. So here's the thing. When people say they are natural born mediums, I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying that they just may have had a mapping of it that is different than like mine was. Also, there is something to a certain kind of prescience. I think that spiritual arts are really just like every other, intuitive arts are just like every other kind of artistic expression. You know, it's like if you were a person who like Prince, I'm going to mention Prince again. Prince is here with us. Prince was a prodigious musician. When he was very young, I think I read once that he wrote his first song or maybe his first album when he was like 6. So he was very prodigious. He also had a musical father and mother, I think. Both of his parents maybe were very musical. So he was also immersed in it. And he was able to play many instruments at a very young age. And so, yes, he is an exceedingly prodigious musician, and he also turned it into a really reliable skill set. So people that have certain predispositions, it still needs to be developed into a skill set. Now, on the other hand, there are people like Madonna really developed a singing voice that she could become an incredibly successful artist as a singer, was not as prodigious as a musician, not nearly at all as Prince. Both needed to develop a skill. So there's a little bit of like, sure, there's some people, and some people that watch my show are hypnotherapists, because I'm a certified clinical hypnotherapist. I also teach hypnotherapy. It has to do with your suggestibility. You might have a kind of suggestible type that is left open to those experiences, and maybe you have beliefs that also facilitate those experiences a little more strongly than my beliefs were against that. And so even though it had happened, I had forgotten it or had not recognized it at the time. So there's the other thing I want to mention while we're in the subject of developing them. Part of development is also to attune them how you want. So sometimes you'll hear people say that, and also TV shows tend to show mediums seeing like really gruesome things. And you don't have to have gruesome things as a part of your mediumship. By the way, I'm a multidimensional medium, which I will be talking about in subsequent episodes. As a medium, I'm multidimensional. I started talking to angels. I started talking and recognizing that I have relationship with fairies and elementals, and that's a major part also of my foundation. I also recognized that ascended masters, or these different kinds of like Jesus is an ascended master, and I always had a relationship with Jesus. Talking to Jesus was mediumship when I was in Christianity. It was just not framed as such. And I still talk to Jesus. And also interdimensionals. I'm very much into the fact that we're about to experience open contact with extraterrestrials or ultra terrestrials or ultra interdimensionals. There's many different names for non-human intelligences. Many of them are highly benevolent and want to help and support us, but they're not going to intervene. And so this is why I'm mentioning this, because if any of this is exciting or interesting you, I highly encourage you to begin to cultivate your extraordinary abilities, because they're there for you. I heard Lynn Buchanan say, and this is a great way to describe it, I think. Lynn Buchanan is a very successful remote viewer. He is a sergeant in, I can't remember what military branch at this time. Should have looked it up before I started this. Oh, well. At any rate, you can look him up, Lynn Buchanan. And he was saying that remote viewing is a psychic or a non-physical ability. He was saying that like Pat Price was another really famous remote viewer during the Cold War. And he said Pat Price was psychic, meaning basically he had this prescience that was very natural, but of course he had to create a skill around it. And Lynn Buchanan said that his way, even though he had some natural ability, his way was more of a learned way. And he said it's like a martial art. And I think at any rate, you want to cultivate it like a martial art. And so to my point again, the cultivating isn't just turning it off or on, although turning it on can be really important for some people, like it was for me. For other people, it was on earlier, but they didn't know how to tune it or attenuate it, so they turned it off. And then there's many things in between that in your development, you can continue to choose what you want to experience, whether it's something that you want to move away from or something you want to cultivate and move toward. Like if you really want to cultivate angel mediumship, talking to angels or channeling angels, that's something that you can do. If you want to be someone who is communicating with higher dimensional beings so that it can help you to live your absolute most amazing life, basically living your soul purpose, and your higher self is actually fully occupying you, and having the communication with higher dimensional light beings could help you with that. Having them on your counsel, having them supporting and helping you, having them go before you to clear pathways, and you never really wanted to talk to people's deceased loved ones or to cross people over, that's all perfectly fine. This is the amazing stuff that we have available to us. Now, I want to just tell you that a key to this is, the main thing about this is your consciousness. So as I said in my story, Caroline was inducing me into a state to be able to tune into my chakras. That's a form of hypnosis. Let me just say that hypnosis is a broad category that includes all non-normative states. A normative state is when you're logic, reasoning, analysis, decision-making, willpower, that kind of state. The beta state, if you're familiar with brainwave function, dominant beta wave. If you're daydreamy, if you are in a creative state, if you go into a creative state to either play your instrument or write something or to come up with new ideas, those are all altered states. Those are more akin to an alpha brainwave state. And they are altered states. They are meditative states or hypnosis. Meditation is a form of hypnosis. So I'm not saying that it's like all Labrador retrievers are dogs, but not all dogs are Labrador retrievers. Hypnosis is dogs. Meditation is a Labrador retriever. And there's yoga nidra, and there is different kinds of trance meditations. There's mindfulness, which is also tuning you out of a non-resourceful state and tuning you into a resourceful state. All of these things are being able to use your awareness, your conscious awareness, in a way that you want to. It's like working out. I call it consciousness fitness. That is fundamental to being able to connect with whether you have an intuitive connection, a creative connection, or a mediumistic connection. Caroline was starting to help me to, not only in our sessions, she also encouraged me to do a meditation. Really, all I started with was a body scan, taking 5 minutes to get really in my body and scanning my body. And that set me off on my meditation practice every day. That's what set me off to be able to go, I wonder if I could meet a spirit guide, and eventually my great grandmother showing up. It was me in state, all on my own, and just exploring. And I'll tell you this too, the key to meditation or, self-hypnosis, it's also the key to not only to be able to maybe connect with other kinds of entities or to manifest if you're into manifestation. It is also the key to having resourceful states, meaning it's the key to breaking stress and worry. And what I was having was basically energy leakage by having thoughts and emotions and states that were holding on to them when I didn't know it. I wasn't aware of the fact that I was holding on to them. So that's everything. That also facilitates what Neville Goddard calls awakened imagination, because all of this does occur through the faculties of imagery. And imagery isn't only seeing pictures in your mind. Imagery is also the sense of clairaudience. It's all of the clairs, if you're familiar with clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, clairgustance, clairalience, all claircognizance. All of those are happening in altered states. Even if it's so lightly altered, it doesn't mean that you are passed out with your eyes closed. You could be just walking around, and that's how you receive a message, because you are lightly altered. And to be able to move into the different dimensions that you want to tune into the different frequencies that you choose so that you can experience your extraordinary abilities so that you can apply them to your extraordinary life. Hypnosis, and within hypnosis meditation, is you actually connecting with your subconscious mind. And in connecting with your subconscious mind and actively letting it communicate, you're creating a pathway between your subconscious mind and your conscious mind so that you can influence your own beliefs. You can influence your own habits. You can influence your own frequency stability, meaning that you are in a better resourceful state, you're healthier and happier. And also, if you want to connect with high order light beings, you can consciously make that choice, influence your subconscious mind so that you can allow that, you can facilitate it. And here's the thing, we go into the subconscious mind in order to create the portal or access the portal to the superconscious. And the superconscious is the capacity of you that is the all that is. And so it is, as people think superconscious, they also call it your higher self. It's really the soul level. And yes, the higher self is involved as the imagery language translator. And that is where the field of unity is, and how it is entirely not only safe, but amazing to be in communication with your highest self, and also all of the galactic and intergalactic and eternal beings and angels and so on and so forth who love you unconditionally and want you to be supported in whatever your soul purpose is here on this planet. You go in to go to the all that is without. Okay, just in case you've forgotten and you're new here, I'm Tricia. And I want to tell you that if you want to awaken or attune your extraordinary abilities, whether you've ever experienced them or not, we'll find out. And if you want to live an extraordinary life, I suggest you check out a few things that I have. Check out Multidimensional Mediumship, check out Modern Mystic Life, and check out Sacred Sphere. I also have some one-on-one sessions, sometimes, not always. And I have a big catalog of really awesome, active containers of spiritual development and learning. Also, I have a free community, and it's called the Wayshower Community. You can find all those links below. That's about wrapping it up for this episode, but I want to say I would love for you to come back to the next episode, because next episode, I'm going to be sharing how back in 2015, as my father's body lay in a hospital in a different state, I crossed him over into the light before his body expired. So come back for that and continue to please shine your light on our beautiful world. Thanks for tuning in. I love you, whoever you are.